It's no secret that the BYU Cougars are very happy to be members of the Big 12 Conference, but could they have timed it better to join the Big 12 and the Power 4 ranks? I don't think so, and I've got some evidence to back it up. Let's dig into it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and more importantly, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first purchase. All right, we're going to talk about BYU's run in the Big 12 so far and why it's been essentially perfect timing in my mind. We'll also talk a little bit about some background of myself. I had some questions sent into our Locked On Cougars insider group, and one story that I don't think any of you are going to want to miss because it involves Arizona State from this past season, and I don't think I've told the story to anybody publicly. So get ready for that. And we'll also talk a little BYU hoops as they get ready to take on UCF in Orlando tomorrow afternoon. Let's dive right in, though, and talk about BYU and the Big 12. Now, I said in the open, BYU is very happy to be members of the Big 12 Conference, and for good reason. A, gives them access to the Power 4 ranks, opens that door that allows them to play for a national championship in football, most importantly. And the third thing is BYU's making money hand over foot right now. They have never had more money or will never have more money coming into their athletic department coffers than what they're going to get via media rights, the different avenues that the Big 12 pays the members of the conference. I said, is there a more perfect time that BYU could have joined the conference? I don't think there is. And I think some of it's happenstance, but the bigger point to be made is BYU joined in at a time where the entire sports landscape, especially in college athletics, is transforming literally day by day. Today, if I recall correctly, is the final day that the what do you call them? The briefs or the objections to the House settlement that the NCAA agreed to that is going to allow for revenue sharing. Those all have to be filed by today, if I recall correctly. So we'll see what happens on that front. That is supposed to be ratified or at least, I guess, agreed to and settled by the judge in April if all goes well. And then come this summer, $20+ million is going to be available from the schools to be paid directly to their athletes. Don't tell me that they're not athletes when they're being paid. Well, they're going to be paying out multiple millions of dollars to these athletes, but I digress on that point. The bigger point is BYU, unlike some other universities out there, is going to be able to absorb that $20 million injection or having to carve out $20 million in your budget much better than most other programs across the country in the Power 4 ranks because BYU, frankly, has never had this much money, and they have an opportunity to just make it a part of their proverbial everyday lives at BYU. Indiana and other universities are currently going through budget cuts, just cutting and firing people, trying to find mechanisms to make up this money that you're going to have to pay out. A lot of these schools, University of Utah, the school up north, is the term I think a lot of people are starting to use in Provo. They just posted a $17 million deficit this past year. Where are you going to be able to pay $20+ million to your athletes from? Well, there's probably going to be a bigger deficit next year. And I digress on the taxpayer side of things with regards to be a publicly funded university. But the thing is, BYU is in a very, very advantageous position. And even it's going to be even more advantageous because in a stroke of genius, maybe it's just the circumstances being what they were. Remember when Brett Yormark essentially jumped the shark, stepped in front of the Pac-12 and got that 6-year deal with ESPN and Fox and locked in the media rights for the Big 12 Conference. You all remember when that went down? Well, let's just put it this way. That is going to prove to be a very prudent and smart decision because you saw it yesterday. The Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC for short, has ratified the extension of its media rights deal with ESPN through, wait for it, 2036. Now, you're probably thinking, did they get some extra money? No. Did they get new terms? Not really. They obviously added 3 new schools in Cal, Stanford, and SMU that are going to bring some extra dollars just by the pro rata clauses that were in the contracts. But it's more mouths to feed with essentially the same size pie relative to the membership in the ACC. So why did they agree to this? Well, the ACC is trying to quell an uprising from Clemson and Florida State, most notably, who had filed lawsuits against the ACC trying to jailbreak themselves. The other thing is that ESPN has agreed to look into opportunities to generate more revenue for the schools in the conference via premier matchups between top schools in the league. That's going to be a negligible amount. And the thing is, right now, from the 2022-2023 payouts, this comes from the AP story of the Associated Press on payouts from the ACC. The ACC distributed an average of $44.8 million to what was then its 14 football playing members and $706 million overall in total revenue for 2022-2023. Where's the Big 12 in relation to that? Like I said, from 2022 to 2023. The Big 12 at the time was smaller, obviously. They had $510.7 million total, but paid out $44.2 million. If the numbers are going to hold, and the numbers are that the ACC is going to be paying out, essentially, we're talking, it'll probably top north of 50 million at the end of that media rights, still maybe get to $55 million at the end of their media rights, still in the middle of the next decade. But the Big 12, which BYU is a proud member of, they're going to have an opportunity to renegotiate new media rights deals at the end of this decade, going into the next decade. The thought is that the Big 12 is going to be right in lockstep, if not passing the ACC by the end of the current term of the Big 12's media rights deals. But then they get to renegotiate, in theory, add more money to the pot, and then get back in and potentially could have a second renegotiation by the time the ACC gets to what is going to amount to their official first renegotiation with these media rights companies. This is a really, really good spot for BYU and the Big 12 to be in, because they're going to be able to cash in once, maybe twice, before the ACC finally gets back up for renegotiation. We all know that these two conferences, speaking of the ACC and the Big 12, are trying to chase the Big 10 and the SEC. They're paying out 60 plus million right now, could push north of 75, 80, $100 million at their media rights deals. You have to find a way to chase that down. The goal for the Big 12 in the next 5-ish years, as this media rights current deal plays out, is to make themselves so compelling that when it comes back up, I think it's 2030 is when the new media rights, it might be 2031, comes back around, you have the ESPNs, the Fox Sports. But at that point, is Netflix in the picture? Is Amazon in the picture? These companies, you want to make yourself so compelling, and it's going to require teams like BYU to be very competitive. You have to go make yourself as compelling as possible to cash in and jumpstart and jump the overall payouts for these universities. So the crazy thing is, with this house settlement, with the transfer portal, the rise of NIL, the various things that are happening in college football and college athletics across the board, and then most importantly, media rights, which seem to be the lifeblood of these universities, quite frankly, there was not a better time that BYU could have joined the Big 12 Conference. Sure, joining in 2016 when those rumors were as hot as could be were really, really fun, and all of us were hoping that BYU was going to join the league at that point. But who knows how things might have looked had BYU joined 5-ish years before they actually joined. I believe BYU nailed it in retrospect when they got into the league. And the Big 12, by virtue of what they did, has bolstered themselves as well. So the Cougars, they are in a very, very advantageous spot. Now it's their job to do what they did like this past season in 2024 and go out and win at a high level. Make yourself as compelling as possible and see more and more dollars roll in, and thereby make yourself stronger and stronger, because BYU is very smart about how it invests and where it invests its money. And I look forward to seeing them build something very, very sustainable in the relatively near future. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about, man, I have held on to this story for months now. It happened towards the tail end of last season. It involves Arizona State. It involves BYU. It involves an NIL agent. Get ready, folks. It's story time with Jake Hatch coming up next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Attend NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. Obviously, you want to get out to the Super Bowl here in the next week. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans is absolutely unmatched. And obviously, all of us want to feel that from time to time. But even if it's not football that you're into, our friends at Game Time can get you guys out to whatever game you want to go to. Game Time makes it easier to create those unforgettable moments across the board with their new feature called Game Time Picks, filtering out all the fluff and show you only the best tickets on the best deals, on great seats, so you can focus on what really matters, and that simply is being there and enjoying the event you're at. All of us want to have a better way to get tickets and obviously enjoy ourselves. The best part is they have an all-in pricing feature. It's a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're paying for right up front. Plus, knowing your tickets are backed up by the Game Time guarantee gives you complete peace of mind. Even have lowest price guarantees, event cancellation protection, even job loss protection if you lose your gig along the way. So take the guesswork, out of buying your tickets and do it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Friday. All right. So pulling back the curtain a little bit, I threw out to our Locked On Cougars Insider group yesterday that I had a certain plan for today's show that fell through. So I was like, hey, I'm a bit thrown for a loop here. Give me some ideas of what you guys would like me to cover that I maybe haven't touched on this week on the podcast. So it's kind of a pseudo mailbag, and I do need to give a shout out, by the way, to John Tucker. He actually asked a question about the ACC media rights deal and how it may change the college football landscape. So that was kind of the impetus of what I talked about in the first segment. But these two questions. We're going to have some fun here. So we'll get to the most juicy one first, and we'll get to the, I guess, more tame one later. But they were great questions that came in from Jason and Adrian. So first one comes in from Jason, and he says this: I'd love to hear some stories about what you have been able to be part of from your dream job. Share some highlights, meeting coaches or NFL players, celebrities, etc., or just moments that have been special to you from the radio show to broadcasting Locked On Cougars. I'm going to pivot on this, Jason, and tell a story that I have held on to for months now, because the proverbial statute of limitations has expired on this, I think. And if they want to come back at me, go for it, because they're lucky I didn't blast them at the time. So let's set the scene. Remember when BYU lost to Arizona State last season? Obviously a tough loss. And there's a quarterback by the name of Sam Leavitt. Brother Dallin played at BYU for a time, transferred to Utah State, has had a pretty fraught relationship with Brigham Young University over the years and the fan base. So in the aftermath of that game, many of you might recall that Dallin got on Instagram and told BYU fans to do something very crude to themselves. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If you saw it, if you did not, you can just Google it. It'll pop up. You can stop right now, Google it. I'm not going to play it on the podcast because it's very lewd, and there's children listening to this podcast. Bigger point to be made is I took the video of that because it had been edited by a lot of people who posted it with just the part telling BYU fans, like I said, to go do certain things. He started out saying, hey, I respect BYU, respect Kalani Sitake, but BYU fans, and then it goes into it. I posted that on social media, on Twitter in particular. And as the weekend progressed, it picked up some steam. Obviously, when you go after a fan base the way that he did, speaking of Dallin, obviously people are going to react to it. It's one of my most retweeted, most noticed overall tweets of all time. I even have one that from John Boy, if you know who John Boy is, that rivals it. It's pretty, and I know the Twitter is one thing, but regardless, the point is Sunday evening after that game, so 24 hours-ish after the game ended, I got a message from an agent saying, hey, Jake, I'm so-and-so. I represent some players from various universities, including some at BYU. So this agent, I'm not going to name him. I'm not going to put him on blast, or maybe I should, but said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things tomorrow. So the premise I was inferring is that he had something on BYU, maybe some background intel that I could utilize. In media, you take advantage to talk to people and see what they have for you. So I said, sure, I'll give you a call after my radio show Monday morning. So it's around 11 a.m. Mountain Time when I gave him a phone call, and he said, he gets on the call and says, Jake, thanks so much for taking the time. And he says, so, and I probably should have mentioned this right up front, but I'm Sam Leavitt's NIL agent. And I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? So he goes into this spiel about the video that Dallin Levitt had put out and why he was so upset about it. It had caused family issues within the Levitt family, and he essentially the whole ploy was to get me to take my version of the video down because in their mind it would end the end the overall fur around what he said to BYU fans. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll consider it, but I'm kind of disinclined because your guy, and this, by the way, this is not Dallin Levitt's agent, it's his brother's agent. Beside the point, says, hey, will you consider taking it out? I'll consider it, but I'm kind of disinclined to say I'm going to do it because it's news. He put it on a public forum. That's his problem. We said, well, I'd like to have you talk to Dallin Levitt himself. Great. So we get on a three-way call at this point, and Dallin Levitt goes into the same spiel that he's trying to make up with his brother. And I've had such a fraud. And there are so many details in this that I've forgotten and probably should mention here. But at the end of the call, I said, okay, guys, I will consider it, but understand that you made a mistake, Dallin, and it is what it is. And me taking my individual post down is not going to stop at that point, probably hundreds of others that were out there on the internet, regardless. So I got that call, talked to certain people that I trust on such matters and say, hey, should I take it down? Am I in any legal ramification with it? There was no grounds for them to really do anything legally. So I'm leaving it up. So, but the reason I tell this story is because the Levitt family thought that little old me doing a podcast and being a radio producer in Salt Lake City was going to stop strained relationships within the Levitt family. And I will also add this. Remember, if Arizona State had lost the following week or other things played out, BYU could have made it to Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game. That was still there on the table for BYU going into that Houston game, if you will recall. This agent had the gall to tell me this also on that phone call. Jake, I understand why you have the stance you have, but understand that we're trying to make sure that Sam's got a clear head and everything's going, but hey, it may play out better in BYU's favor if you leave it up. What? Dude, come on now. I'm a podcaster and a radio producer. Get over yourself. And by the way, I think looking at it, it worked out just fine for Arizona State and Sam Levitt. I'm just saying. I still see Dallin Levitt posting about his brother. I still see him hanging around. Don't have your agent call me and give me some sob story that, quite frankly, I think is a bunch of you-know-what, bull honky. But that happened this season. That's pulling back the curtain a little bit on trust me, I've got many of those from now nearly 15 years of working in the media, and I hope to have many more over the years. That's just one little one. And I meant to also, because Adrian asked the question about my background in radio. He said, I can't be the only one that wants to hear how you got your start in radio. You've done well, and I think it'd be cool to hear. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version because you got to get to some other stuff here on BYU basketball. But my start in radio came because of my dad, quite frankly. And back in the early days of what is now X, formerly Twitter, Greg Wrubell, this was 2010, so the summer of 2010, put out a post at that point, a tweet saying, hey, I'm looking for an intern for this upcoming football season. If you're interested, apply. You have to be a student. It's for school credit. It's an unpaid internship. And I was working at a job while I was still a student at BYU at the time. I said, that'd be kind of cool to do, but I studied history in college, guys. I'm not a comms guy. I know that I work in communications now, but it's not my background. It wasn't what I was studying in college at the time. And my dad, I told him about it. I said, apply. Just do it. What's the worst they can say? No. Then you move on. So I applied for it. Sounded like Greg Wrubell actually down in the Smithfield house. He set up in those where the Rock now resides. We were sitting up there talking, and I kind of gave my background. I was a BYU guy, growing up BYU fan. I going to BYU. I'd love to work around the program. It's a dream of mine. And he said, great. I appreciate you taking the time after our chat, and I'll get back in touch with you. 3 days later, Greg calls me up and says, hey, the gig's yours. Sweet. So I worked with Greg for an entire year. Remember, 2010, 2011, I did the football season, and then the basketball season was the year of the Jimmer. And talk about a year to be an intern and to be kind of thrown into the fire, or the frying pan with regards to media. It was crazy, crazy times. I learned so much that first year and I loved every second of it and said, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to be in the media. It didn't take very long to realize this is what I want to do. Well, I didn't have a ton of prospects immediately coming out of that. So then I spent another year, the following year, and the NBA lockout that year, if you recall, the NBA didn't tip off till mid-December when they finally got going. Worked with David Locke on, was then a 1320K fan as a broadcast assistant. He still does this program to this day. Interned on that. And then the summer after that, Scott Gerard, who was the program director for 1280 The Zone now, which is now 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone, which I still work for to this day, reached out to both Greg and David and said, hey, I've got this little signal called 960 AM. Any of you might recall, it's what Ben Criddle's show is on. I'd like to start a BYU show. Do you have a producer that you have in mind? And they said, yeah, Jake Hatch. So that's how I got hired in radio for the first time ever. I was the original producer of Cougar Sports, which was then Cougar Sports with Lemma Harrington and Ben Criddle. Lemma and I, after a couple of years, actually, I think I left first. I got promoted to working with DJ and PK, where I've been for the better part of actually more than a decade now. And the rest is history, quite frankly. So that's the kind of the Cliff Notes version of how I got into the media. And I've been lucky. It truly is a dream gig. Like I said, I realized it maybe not even a month into working with Craig. I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And it's worked. Trust me. I'm not just sitting back and watching games, and that's the perk of it. But many of you, I think, understand that the hours involved. I put it on the show with DJ and PK every morning. I'm up at 3:30 a.m. Daily. Come home. I've got 3 kids now. I'm married. I do this podcast. I record it in the evenings. There's a time consuming element to it, but it is absolutely a dream gig. And when you get agents reaching out to you and asking you to take down posts and trying to play some sob story and then getting down 11 on the phone, just welcome to my everyday life in radio. I never quite know what my media life is ever going to hold on a day-to-day basis, but there are both really high and really weird and really low moments, and it's all rolled up into quite frankly, overall, I've loved every second of it. I truly, it's been a dream job. I'm lucky enough that I get to talk about sports and it provides for my family. Like, there are not a ton of people in the world that get to do it. My passion, which is sports, it's my career. So it's a really cool thing. So yeah. So maybe those 2 stories matter to you. Maybe they don't, but when that question was asked, it's Friday. We're going to have some fun. And yeah, I hope that agent hears about this and calls me back up, because I got a few other thoughts for him. We'll hold off on that for another day. All right. Coming up next, though, BYU basketball. Finish up on the hoops front. They're looking to make it 4-0 as they are now in Orlando getting ready to take on the UCF Knights. Another Q1 game for BYU. They want to bolster their resume when it comes to NCAA tournament, March Madness. The major opportunity as they take on the Knights tomorrow afternoon. We'll delve into that and preview it next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I just mentioned a little bit earlier, we have the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. I say it all the time. Join us today. You can get the inside scoop on all things BYU news/inside intel that I'm hearing. It goes to the Insider Group first. I don't put it on X. I don't put it on this podcast. It goes there first, comes to the phone, and comes to your phone in the form of text messages. Does not get much more direct than that or intimate. If you want to have one-on-one conversations via text with myself, you can do that as well. Just $5 a month to be a part of the group. But the best incentive I can give you guys, 2 full weeks, 14 days, no charge to be a part of it. Give it a try and see if it's right for you. But join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. The way to join, link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. There's a hyperlink there. Click it, join up today, and be a part of the Insider Group. All right. Before we go on today's show, BYU basketball is in Orlando to take on the UCF Knights. Now, this game last year, remember, BYU had a really hard-fought game against UCF. Johnny Dawkins, their head coach, I think is a really, really good coach and does a really, really good job with this program. Last year, that UCF game gave us maybe the most stunning play. I thought, just you didn't expect it. Remember, Ali Khalifa was dealing with a really, really tough knee injury that he battled through last year. And then he went and yammed it in this game down there in Orlando. I remember the palm fronds and their fans going crazy. Well, this UCF team, they're no pushovers here. They have really done a good job in their overall this season, but they're going to be a stiff test for BYU. They have played three ranked teams in their past 4 games. They played Houston, Iowa State, and Kansas. They have taken losses in all those games, but I thought the Kansas game, I was watching it actually, the final stanza of it, while BYU was taking on Baylor on Tuesday night. I think they got hard done by the referees in Fog Allen Fieldhouse. I'm not saying they would have won, but there's some calls late in that game. They got a little suspicious. They do have a win over TCU, though, in that run. And this is a Q1 game for BYU as they head to UCF. And I'm looking forward to this for one reason, because as we mentioned, BYU made some history with their win over Baylor because it's their first ever 3-game win streak in Big 12 in their Big 12 era. So really cool to see that. But the bigger point he made here is, can you make it 4 in a row here? You can pick up back-to-back Q1 wins and get one of them on the road against UCF. That's going to give you a lot of juice when it comes to staying on the bubble and pushing yourself or injecting yourself into the NCAA tournament discussion. It's going to be a hard-fought game. This is the furthest road trip outside of Providence BYU makes all year. Remember, BYU went to Providence and got absolutely demolished in early December. They've learned a lot about how to compete on the road, picked up that road win at Colorado, but UCF, they're a heck of a team as compared to what Colorado was, and you got to watch out for the backcourt. This is a team that's led by its backcourt. Keyshawn Hall averaging 18 points per game. Darius Johnson averaging 14.7. And then Jordan Ivy Curry, 14.5. Perimeter defense, which is one of the things BYU struggled with at points this year, is going to be at a premium here. They have to be able to defend on the perimeter and slow down this 3-pronged attack from UCF. If you can do that, you will give yourself a fighting chance. The one thing I like about what BYU carries over from this Baylor game is they learned how to win a tight game. Remember, they had been in a lot of tight games this year, especially in Big 12 play, but had never been able to really find themselves on the right side of those tight games. This is another opportunity, because I'm fully expecting this one to go down to the wire, that BYU is going to have to be able to buckle in and really dig in. This is a game that you're going to have the crowd going against you. You've got, like I said, a 3-headed monster at guard that wants nothing more than to bombs away on you. I think their shooting percentages, let's look at it. Yeah, the 3-point shooting percentages as a team aren't elite by any means, but Hall 38%, Johnson 43% on the season, and Ivy Curry 36.1%. The 35.1% as a team. So not necessarily a prolific shooting team, but if you let these guys start cooking, to use that term, you're going to struggle with it. So guys like Trevin Nell, Cannon Catchings, where, yes, they're really, really good offensive threats, no going under on screens. You got to fight through those screens. You've got to stick to your man. You've got to get hand up in the face of these guys. I like BYU's length in this matchup. I think that will help them, because you got guys like Jaeger Demon and Cannon Catchings who just, they're long as they can be with being standing 6'9" and having their wingspans that they have. You got to use that to your advantage, but there's got to be a toughness element we see from this team. Keyshawn Hall, he's got really, really good size, 6'7", 235, so he will bring it. But I think that you got guys like Mawit Mag who are more than capable of holding their own in these matchups. So this is a really, really interesting game. The ESPN BPI, the basketball percentages index, has like a 51 to 49% split in favor of UCF just being the home team. It's almost a pick 'em in that parlance. So this is a huge game, a huge opportunity for BYU. But if they can go make it 4 straight wins, get ready for a lot more talk about BYU being a tournament team. And we're already seeing some of it crop up just by virtue of that win over Baylor. But you beat UCF on the road, and suddenly you got 2 Q1 wins in your back pocket. You got a lot of momentum on a 4-game win streak. And then, oh, hey, this team called Arizona that's coming to town on Tuesday night. It doesn't get much more difficult than what BYU is facing right now. But I think this team, they're feeling good about themselves, and they should be feeling good about themselves as they get ready for a stretch run here that is going to absolutely test them to the nth degree. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on a Friday. So a little scatterbrained at points, but hey, all the same, it's a blast to be doing this podcast. I truly do mean it. It's a dream come true to do what I do. And your guys' support, it's why I do what I do. Even the pot shots I take from time to time, don't really kind of water off my back at this point. It's a true honor to sit down every day and talk about BYU, a team, a program, a school that's near and dear to my heart. So it's a really cool thing. And I appreciate once again all of you for being with us. So for the end of this week, we'll do a postcast tomorrow evening after the UCF game, but full editions of the podcast back on Monday, talking about the Arizona game, outcomes from UCF, that type of stuff, more football talk. We got plenty to cover. Don't worry. We'll be here all off season long, every single day, talking all things BYU. I can assure you of that. So once again, as I often say, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. But more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.